So what was the biggest dot connection you had? Sort of like a BFO, you had all this experience prior, you said. So what was the biggest like, oh my God, that totally makes sense moment?
I'd say there was three main things that stand out. First one is we tend to overcomplicate way more than we need to. And I say we, just in general, collectively, coaches out there tend to overcomplicate the system. Second one, how we can pull the different pieces of content and put it together in various ways that make sense. Obviously, there's kind of the standard cookie cutter. Here's something on Teams, or here's something on the 5 ways. But there's ways that we can kind of pull some of those pieces out and put them together in something that makes sense for the individual client or group that we're talking to. So that was a big one. And then there was a big, powerful piece around the IM affirmation statements and how to utilize that effectively, which I thought was very powerful. Are you familiar with the IMs? The
principle of it, yeah.
So the IMs were every morning you've got your list of I am whatever. It can be I am great at marketing. I can, whatever. Yeah. And then saying those, verbalizing them, really helps make that connection, and ultimately with the proper action helps you materialize that. And there was a coach or a trainer that connected the dots that they shouldn't be true affirmations. They need to be something that you want that you don't yet have. And then the second piece of it is pay attention to what your thoughts are directly after saying it. If it's a negative response, like I'm going to be a millionaire, if your brain just automatically says bullshit, that's very different than scaling it to something that's just above or just out of reach, and your mind goes, it has a neutral response or even a positive response to it. It's very different on how that all connects that way. So the I am statements kind of are a progression as you continue to grow as an individual.
So would the application be switching it to I am going to sell 250,000 this year, or whatever the next step is to getting there?
Yeah. Yep. Could be that. It could be, it's whatever you need to break it down to, where your brain has a neutral or positive response to it versus, that's not attainable. Like that thought process, because then it just completely negates the thought pattern of putting your mind towards those future goals.
That's super interesting. I saw Michael Lozier at, I think it was the last BEF before they switched it to BizX, I think it was. And he talked about that. And that was the same problem I had, is I'm like, okay, yeah, same analogy. I can say I'm going to be a millionaire. And he just changed the one word. Instead of saying I am a millionaire, I am working at being a millionaire or something, but I still felt like it was bullshit. So that's interesting to hear the language changes.
Yeah, it's exactly that. As I went through, have you ever done a session with Lozier?
No.
So I've gone through and I've actually done 2 sessions with him. I think most of us here in Texas have. He has a virtual version that he does. You can go onto his site and he'll do I can't remember what it's called, but it was really cool to see him in action, like actually working through. But that idea.
It wasn't pre-recorded?
No, like actually live with him. Yes. So but yeah, going through that mindset piece is just so powerful, and then figuring out how to do it appropriately, where you're actually building the tool of your mind rather than just saying things because that's the best practice to do it.
I gotta ask, how does that work for you? Because I'm always so interested in learning more about DISC stuff, and being somebody that I think you've identified to me has the D and the C. You want the details, but you don't want the details. How the hell does that work?
Depends on the situation. I'm highly task oriented, not so much people oriented. So I've got to really pull that part of my DISC profile up. There are some cases, it really depends on the decision and what I deem super important or not. because there's a lot of things like, as an example, for our training group at training, we had to name our group. That was one of those things where I'm like, just go figure it out. Like, I don't need to worry about the name. Just pick a name and be done with it.
Isn't that part of the process?
Well, long story to go behind that, but at the end of the day, it was just like, I don't need to analyze 50 different names. Just pick one. It'll be fine. Versus, there's, I don't know, buying a car, completely different. I want the details. I want to make sure that the decision is made correctly. I want to know what's going to happen. There's a lot more detail oriented that comes along with that. So it really just depends, but it's very task checklist driven. And it's just, in some cases, it's nope, let's make a decision. Other cases, it's let's slow down, let's get the detail and go from there.
Interesting.
So yeah.
That's very cool though, because that helps. I'm thinking a lot about, how I make business decisions and stuff too. And I think that's where I get stuck sometimes, is it's very hard for me I always do the opposite. In spots where I should speed up and just make a decision and be done, I don't. And then the reverse, in spots where I need to slow down, I'm going too fast. And it's taken some of my team members to be like, hey, hold on a second.
Yes, the whole concept of understanding how to communicate through DISC is really cool. Kind of going through that and understanding where we can shift, or when we get good at shifting our DISC profiles enough to be able to communicate in a given situation. As an example, as a high CD, task oriented, it's typically not the profile of somebody that can be up on stage and have that personality that's fun and such for presenting, things like that. But in that moment, I can pull up that part of my DISC profile and be completely different.
There's a lot of people that align with that though.
Yeah.
With the opposite profile, because I ran an event twice called Propel. It was sort of like a women's training type of thing, but I had a handful of speakers and it was interesting. The two people that I thought, for me, I don't want to say just filter free, the poorest speakers, like they didn't engage as much, whatever. The matching DISC profiles in the room thought they were the best. So it's interesting how that aligns with people.
And there's the art to being able to transition through and be able to speak to each DISC profile in the room as you're up on stage, which I think takes a lot of practice in how, the languaging that you use, the pace that you go, the bullet points, where do you get into detail, where do you not, how do you humanize the conversation, bring in the passion and the stories that come along behind it. And that tends to be how probably the best presenters tend to operate, because then you've got the entire crowd all enthralled with what they're saying.
That's a good point. I'm totally picking your brain, but this is so interesting and you just learned all this stuff. So how do you shift DISC profiles and stay authentic to who you are?
I don't necessarily think it's shifting DISC profiles. It's being able to communicate in the appropriate DISC. So when I take the DISC assessment, whether it's now or 3 years from now, I will likely still test about the same. But when I'm having a conversation with somebody, how can I communicate in their style so that we can genuinely connect in a better way? If I'm talking to somebody who is a high I, I'm going to need to be okay with opening up a little bit more about what's going on in life and ask them about those types of things. While that's still genuine to who I am, it may not be as comfortable, as easy for me to do it naturally. If I'm talking to somebody that's similar to me, they probably don't care if I ask them, how's your day going? What are you doing this weekend? But that doesn't just, that doesn't take away from the fact that the conversation's still basically the same. It's just how that conversation's being had. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So how do you like to open a conversation with somebody that's not a big people person? Because I always struggle with that, because that's kind of my opposite profile, like we were talking about that other time.
So we're talking more on kind of the C's and the D's, more task oriented, less people oriented.
Yeah, or even S's and C's. I think that's where I struggle the most. When I'm networking, it's pretty easy for me to connect with an I. It's pretty easy for me to connect with a D, but the S's and C's are where I really struggle.
S's focus on others. Ask them about their kids, the people they work with. They're very much others oriented. Rather than themselves. They won't want to talk about them. Traditionally don't want to talk about themselves as much. They'd rather talk about the others in their life. C's, checklists. What have they accomplished? What kind of that, if you frame it kind of from a checklist standpoint, it probably makes more sense that way than anything
So what's
else.
the top 2 things on your checklist for today?
Yeah, something like that, honestly. Or what are some of the things that you've accomplished so far this week, or something down that road that's more of a
More task.
I'm getting things done. Here's that, because that organizational mindset is typically more in that quadrant.
That's like crazy helpful, because seriously, I always start with the I stuff just because that's where I naturally go, and I know it doesn't jive well with a lot of people, and I never know what the hell to ask. So I laughed because I actually felt funny saying that, like, what's the top couple things on your checklist for today? But that actually makes a whole lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. And here was something that was really fun to think about. So we talked about marketing, and marketing is ultimately math. We need to measure results, things like that, right? Thinking about that from a C's perspective, it's just math.
Interesting.
What things are you tracking? How are you measuring the results? Those things are going to jive a lot better with a C than, say, a high I.
Yeah.
And thinking about it from that, putting it on a spreadsheet, here's the details. How can you get really excited about what you're tracking and how many people are searching for you and what you're doing with leads? Like those very regimented checklist, data-driven pieces. High C's can be very good at marketing, managing the marketing and such when framed that way.
That's really interesting. Okay, practical application, dead serious. I'm trying desperately to hire a personal assistant, like blending a personal assistant and an executive assistant, because using all the action coach language and all the things we talk about, I'm not out enough to just be the owner for the executive assistant per se. I'm still too much in the technician role, but I need somebody that's smarter than just a personal assistant. So I've got the job description out there. I did my best to write it to all the DISC profiles, following the action coach hiring system. So I'm asking for phone calls. So like Facebook, you can't, when you post a job on there, you can't like turn off the button for people to apply. So I'm getting a ton of applications through there, even though my graphic, my language, everything says you're not going to even be considered if you don't call. Which, side note, if you're helping people with hiring, that e-voice thing is fucking terrible. Use Dialpad, so much easier. Like the settings in e-voice are just so complicated. Dialpad was so much easier.
We're using Hiring Steps, which was built.
Oh, you told me that.
Yeah, that's basically designed for how we do that phone call in piece.
Interesting. So does it, I don't remember, I remember you mentioning it, but does it do any additional posting, getting it out in front of people or anything like that beyond the phone call system?
You get to choose where you want the job posted. So it'll post it on Indeed, LinkedIn, Craigslist, ZipRecruiter, their own platform.
ZipRecruiter I didn't do, and Craigslist.
And you can choose which ones you want to put it on, and then it puts it all out there, and then everything funnels into Hiring Steps and gives them the link to call in for the recording, and we do the recordings. And the system itself has been working well. It's also gotten better because they can go back, and if they decide not to do it right away and have to go back, it's become a lot easier as they
Mhm.
continue to develop their platform.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I posted it on Indeed, Facebook, LinkedIn, a handful of stuff, and it's only been out a couple of days. But like I said, I mean, I'm getting people that are just randomly clicking shit, but nobody's actually calling in. And it's like I get, especially in my industry, I get so many applications for like assistants and social media people. Everybody wants to be remote. I cannot find anybody.
So let me ask you this question first. What are the tasks and responsibilities that this position is going to be completing?
I
It's
don't
going
want
to
to
be their
lie
day
to
to
you.
day.
I'm going to pull it up. Because I wrote it all out. Here. I mean, I'm still trying to define this because I've never had, nor have I been an assistant of any kind. Here we go.
What are some of the main ones? Some of the big stuff that they would be doing?
Well, basically they need to be my babysitter. I just need help like filtering through all my email stuff. I have all these random little tasks that I wound up asking my project manager to do, which is why I think he's leaving, because like we're still cool, but he wants more than that. And I'm just not big enough. So that's why I realized I'm letting project management go and getting an assistant instead, which puts me back in there a little bit. But so I don't know what the right label would be if it's organizing communication, but like if I'm project managing stuff, I might be asking them to say, okay, go get a roundup from everybody on where they're at. You don't have to understand it, just get the notes for me so I can look at one clean roundup. Scheduling stuff. Like when I do websites, I want to make sure that 3 days before I'm, like go schedule the website review with the client next week. So just look at my calendar and find a spot. And then hopefully know that quote unquote, the rules are that I'll teach them is 3 days before that, I need to have a meeting with the web developer to make sure all the little things are polished and done. So that needs to be scheduled as well, just 30 minutes. So all those types of things. If possible, I really want them coming to Growth Club with me so that they can help man the table. I'm not looking for them to do sales. I don't know if technically it'd be business development because most people I talk to get very nervous when you say the word sales. I just want them to be friendly to people. That's it. So just kind of help me, talk to people. Whoops. I'm trying to think.
More just kind of friendly and like there and really good, or more towards they need to be able to kind of gather people in and have conversations from a kind of sales perspective?
Yeah, I think it's honest to God, it's more manhandling me because I feel like I have so many things going on and I'm spread out so much, and organizing and calendaring is not my strong suit. I'm getting so much better at it. But rather than me it's like accounting, rather than me taking 2 hours to do something that when somebody's strength is calendaring and logistics and organization, if I could say, hey, I need a plan for these 5 clients, here's the things I need to do and the due dates, can you schedule the time in my calendar for me to work on it? Perfect. It just takes me way too long and I get overwhelmed when I look at all that because I overanalyze how much time do I need, where do I need to put it, all that kind of stuff. Part of it's a head trash thing too, because I don't feel like I deserve this kind of help. I feel like I'm capable of all these things. So this is stupid. I should just do it myself. Like I'm being lazy or something.
The question isn't if you should, or the question isn't if you can do all of these things. It's the question of should you be doing all of these things, or can your time be spent better doing other things?
Well, I should be doing sales. That's really all I should be doing right now. And then some of the technical execution, some of it I have to until I hire more people, and that's okay. But yeah, it's all the paperwork and stuff. Like the biggest thing is they need to be tech savvy because we run everything through Google Drive and other programs like that. So they have to be able to be comfortable with other programs. I'm coaching somebody right now that's marketing coaching stuff that literally I'm teaching them how to use Google Drive instead of like how to build graphics or think about social. Like I'm literally just teaching them basic tech skills. So I don't want to hire somebody like that I have to teach just how to use the tools. So.
Okay. So as I'm just reviewing some of the things that you said, if I heard you correctly, it's filtering email, kind of gathering notes and pulling things together, scheduling, able to be friendly to people, but doesn't necessarily need to be the super outgoing person.
Mhm.
Organized, tech savvy. Did I hear that correctly?
I think so.
So as I read that back to you, what DISC profile or profiles does that sound most like?
C for sure, which is going to be interesting. To be honest, I've hired 2 people that have CI profiles. And it's weird because it's like they're bipolar. And I'm not saying that to be an ass. I'm saying it like I'm
Oh,
trying to navigate all this stuff.
It's very rare to have crossover like that, but they do exist.
I found 2 of them.
I was hanging out with one this week. High I, high C. So yes, 100% on the C. Probably the other DISC profile that you're going to be wanting to be geared towards is probably an S.
You think so, or D, because I'm kind of a pain in the ass to work with?
You'll probably butt heads too much if it's too much of a D. If it's not super big on the decision making pieces and it's really just pulling the pieces together, the compliance and rules and organization of a C is going to come in handy, and the people person caring for others, still slower paced, kind of to bring you back to earth a little bit.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be the second profile that you want to be looking for.
Okay.
So as you look at putting the job ad out there, would it be more effective to write towards all DISC profiles or more towards the DISC profile that fits best for what you're looking for?
Well, that's a loaded question. Obviously, the DISC profile that I'm looking for. Now I'm reading it to try and see if I did do that. I mean, learning from the prior people I've worked with and feedback that I've gotten from them, or things I've just observed and what worked and what didn't, a big problem is speed. I move really fast, and if there's things that should be changed in my character, I'm all for it. Like if for the betterment of myself and my company, I should slow down, cool. But if it's to adapt to someone else and that's not going to help anything else, then that's not good. So I guess I'm not sure how much I should slow down. So I put, a fast-paced environment in here a couple of times.
Okay.
But that's
That could be, I mean,
because if it's an SC, that doesn't help.
not necessarily. I mean, if it's fairly defined on here's what the general pace is and here's how that works, and it stays pretty consistent, it may not seem overwhelming to somebody who wants to kind of that more controlled, doesn't like change. They just need to know what they need to do and get after it type deal.
And I think that's where I struggle, is like where I've tried before and I've never had the assistant, so I've never set the expectation that's their job. But I think that's where I struggle is it's hard for me to define cleanly what somebody should be doing in this position, because there's so many random different things that are very not connected to one another that I need help with. Hey, can you go put this in payroll? Hey, I need you to organize this client folder. Just all these random things that are not going to be predictable. And I know an SC wants predictability, so they feel like they can do well. So how do I set something like that up?
At very most, setting those rules the game up front, knowing that there will be other tasks and such defined that may not be super clear at this point. But from what I'm hearing, most of the things that you've stated are all fairly related to one another. It is very admin related. Help me stay on track.
Yeah.
I have not heard you say anything from help me keep on track. Oh, by the way, you have to go make these 20 decisions.
Yeah,
and go do sales and go sell people. That's a very different thing than saying you're already filtering through email and keeping the schedule up to date. And now I also need you to look through some of the bookkeeping pieces or whatever that might look like, and
Yeah.
That's not a far leap versus, by the way, now you need to go out and meet 20 people and convince them to talk to me.
Yeah.
That's a very different
It's all within
task.
the same type of profile, you're saying.
Yes.
Makes sense. I got you for
My
6.
question, my question would be if you were to look at getting someone that tests more on the I or the D,
Mhm.
how effective would these tasks be completed?
Oh, damn, that's a good question. It wouldn't work enough with me. They would just try to do it all themselves. And so I'd be out of the loop because they would just want to get it done. And they'd waste a lot of time talking to people, I think.
Do high eyes typically are high eyes typically really good at managing the schedule and filtering through emails and
That's
having
why I suck.
organization?
That's why I suck at it.
Some D personality might not be terrible, but based on what you've shared,
Yeah.
the S and C is typically a better fit. And my knowledge is most of the really good admins are typically test a little bit higher on the S side of things. Depends. I mean, that's probably because you've also got a lot of people that they're adminning for tend to be high I's, high D's,
Mhm.
or DCs. So having kind of that counterbalance tends to be effective.
I wonder what the statistics are on assistants, like the position of an assistant being similar or opposite of their employer's DISC profile. Like if it's better for them to be similar so they know what they're going through, or opposite, which we kind of just talked about, it probably is opposite because that's why they're looking for help.
Can be. I don't know the statistics. My gut tells me that it's probably more opposite.
Yeah.
D's and S's tend to work very well together because one tends to be more dominant and the other
Yeah.
tends to be caring about others and slows the pace down and has a little bit more organization in some cases. So I know there was a statistic on this and I don't remember what it was, but
Okay.
I think there's a lot of D's and S's that actually end up getting married. Like relationship wise, that tends to work
Yeah.
fairly well.
That's weird. So we got 4 more minutes, right?
Yes, I guess.
I just want to show you. So I feel like I have to change this first sentence because I'm talking to a CD.
Yeah.
Shit.
I think that at the end of the day, it just comes down to, based on what you're outlining as the role, what DISC profile qualities are you looking to hire for?
Yeah,
Speak to them.
that's really good feedback. I got to tweak this. Do you think the length is sufficient, being just shy of 1 page? I mean, is it better to have it shorter, or because of the profile I'm looking, are they going to want more information?
One page is probably good. I go back and forth because I have not mastered this myself yet.
Okay.
I want to put a bunch of detail out there and I've had to shift.
Well, I'm wondering, I mean, I've got a little room left on this page. I wonder if I add just 2 or 3 sentences, if I can do it that tightly, what a typical day looks like we were talking about before, that you'll have some consistent things to do daily, but then there's going to be some rapid fire random stuff coming through too. Or is that too much? Just wait till the interviews.
I probably wouldn't get into, knowing what I know today, I probably wouldn't get as much into the roles, responsibilities, what to expect. I would get more into, let's get them excited to be on the team. Why should they come work for you? Same way that you would attract a client and advertise to a client, attract your team the same way.
You learned a lot.
I've had a
Thank you.
pretty good marketing coach too.
Seriously, I can do this all day long with other people and I sit down to do it myself and I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
There's a reason that our firm has 4 coaches coaching us.
Crazy.
Because we can coach other people all day long, but when it comes to our own businesses, there's still got to be that level of accountability, that extra set of eyes. It's why it's recommended. We don't just teach coaching, we also get coaching. We
That's
are
awesome.
business owners as well. Because exactly that, you can't see it all the time when you're in it every day.
No, you can't. Awesome. Well, this was super helpful. I don't want to eat up more of your time because I know you got lots to do today, but thank you for hanging out with me. This was extremely helpful. It was cool to hear all the stuff that you learned and get some feedback on my job posting.
Of course, I'm happy to share. It'll be fun because I'm going to be opening up coaching slots and doing a lot more presentations and all that fun stuff moving forward.